A lone figure emerges from the early morning haze on the Milan train platform, his steps measured and deliberate, blending seamlessly into the throng of weary commuters clutching coffee cups and newspapers, their faces etched with the mundane worries of daily life. He carries a dog-eared paperback, its cover faded from countless readings, perhaps a thriller that mirrors the perilous existence he leads, and a slender briefcase that holds not business documents but the remnants of a life lived in perpetual flight. 2 rows behind him, a woman slips into her seat with the grace of someone accustomed to invisibility, her fingers tapping rhythmically on her smartphone, scrolling through what appears to be social media feeds. Cute animal videos, perhaps, or travel photos, but her eyes dart occasionally, sharp and vigilant, betraying a purpose far darker than idle distraction. Across the narrow aisle, a man adjusts his camera strap, his lens pointed outward at the awakening Italian landscape. Rolling hills blanketed in mist, vineyards awakening under the first rays of a hesitant sun, ancient olive trees standing as silent witnesses to history's endless parade, to the hurried souls boarding around them. Businessmen checking watches, families herding children, tourists laden with maps. These 3 are just fragments of the crowd, unremarkable threads in the fabric of an ordinary Tuesday commute. But oh, how the heart aches at the deception. For beneath this facade of normalcy pulses a tragedy waiting to unfold, a meticulously crafted web of shadows that will claim a life in the most isolating, soul-crushing way imaginable. In the span of 3 agonizing hours filled with the rhythmic clatter of wheels on tracks, the soft hum of conversations, the fleeting glimpses of a world speeding by, the quiet man is found lifeless in the confined space of a locked bathroom, his body contorted in a final, undignified pose against the cold sink, foam bubbling grotesquely from his parted lips like the last gasp of a drowning dream, the air thick with a subtle, haunting scent of bitter almonds that clings to the nostrils, like an accusation from beyond the grave. No visible signs of violence mar his form, no bruises blooming like dark flowers on his skin, no blood staining the tiles, no evidence of a desperate struggle that might have given him a fighting chance. Authorities, in their initial bewilderment and haste to restore order amid the growing panic of passengers, dismiss it as a natural tragedy. A sudden heart failure, perhaps, or an unforeseen medical catastrophe snatching away another soul in the prime of his shadowed life. Yet, as fingerprints are meticulously scanned and cross-referenced through vast international databases, a chilling truth surfaces like a dagger emerging from fog. This was no random victim of fate's indifference, but a high-ranking commander within Hamas, a man whose existence had become a symbol of resilient defiance, hunted across continents by Israel with the relentless, heartbreaking determination of a nation scarred by endless loss and unyielding fear. His demise was no mere accident. It was a masterpiece of calculated lethality, executed in utter silence, invisible to the world, amid the indifferent motion of a train hurtling toward destiny. A death that evokes profound sorrow for the human cost of geopolitical vendettas. The conductor, a grizzled veteran in his mid-50s with deep-set eyes that have seen too many minor dramas unfold on these rails. Lost children reunited with frantic parents, lovers parting with tearful embraces, the occasional heated argument over seating. Approaches the door with a growing knot of unease twisting in his gut. He knocks once, the sound sharp and insistent against the bathroom's thin panel. Twice, his voice calling out in a mix of Italian authority and genuine concern. 3 times, each rap echoing like the tolling of a funeral bell, amplifying the silence that answers back. No response comes, only the void of absence that sends a shiver down his spine. With trembling hands, he retrieves a master key from his belt, the metal cold against his palm, and forces the lock with a reluctant twist, the door creaking open like the lid of a coffin to reveal a scene that will haunt his nightmares for years. The man slumped awkwardly, his head lolled to one side, eyes glazed over in eternal vacancy, skin already paling to a ghostly hue, the foam a macabre decoration on his once resolute face, evoking the image of a warrior felled not in battle but in the cruel isolation of a metal cubicle. Panic erupts within him like a storm breaking, his breath catching in his throat as he stumbles back, radioing for emergency services with a voice cracked by shock, his mind reeling from the inexplicable horror that has intruded upon his routine world. Whispers spread through the carriage like a virus, passengers craning their necks, faces draining of color, murmurs of speculation filling the air. Was it a seizure? Poison? Oh God! Is it contagious? Each voice laced with the raw fear of mortality, suddenly made tangible, their own fragile lives reflected in the tragedy unfolding before them. This grim discovery sets off a domino effect of international intrigue, a whirlwind of investigations that strip away layers of deception with painstaking care, exposing the raw, bleeding underbelly of modern espionage where human lives are reduced to targets and morality bends under the weight of national imperatives. The body, transported under guard to a sterile morgue where fluorescent lights buzz like accusatory insects, undergoes scrutiny that reveals no overt trauma. No contusions from a violent altercation, no incisions from a hidden blade, nothing to overtly scream of foul play, only the subtle anomalies that whisper of something far more sinister. Yet, as the clock ticks with merciless precision, secure communication channels light up with encrypted urgency. Intelligence operatives from capitals across Europe, the Middle East, and distant power centers exchange frantic dossiers, piecing together fragments that point inescapably to Israel's elite Mossad unit, those enigmatic figures trained in the dark arts of making threats evaporate without a trace, their actions driven by the profound grief of a nation perpetually under siege. Mahmoud al-Khalid, the moniker emblazoned on his meticulously forged passport, was but one alias in a labyrinth of 27 fabricated identities, each a carefully constructed veil donned over 8 years of navigating the treacherous twilight zones between Gaza's war-torn enclaves, Damascus's labyrinthine souks echoing with ancient secrets, and Europe's opulent capitals where luxury masks the undercurrents of global intrigue. To his comrades in Hamas, he was Abu Tariq, the enigmatic visionary whose intellectual prowess engineered intricate financial networks, channeling torrents of millions into the desperate, heartfelt struggle for liberation. Funds that procured arms to defend against overwhelming odds, sustained families ravaged by blockades and bombings, and kindled the flickering flame of hope in a people whose spirits refused to be crushed despite generations of suffering and loss. To Mossad, he embodied a scarlet priority, a threat whose shadow loomed large over Israel's security. His elimination sanctioned in solemn, high-level deliberations where the agony of past attacks, shattered families, orphaned children, communities forever scarred, weighed heavily against the moral cost of one more death in the name of survival. And to the unsuspecting passengers sharing the confined space of carriage 4 on that fateful October morning, he was merely a solitary soul, absorbed in the pages of his novel, occasionally sipping from a steaming cup of black coffee that carried the aroma of distant lands, his gaze drifting to the window where the Italian countryside blurred into a poignant tapestry of greens, golds, and fleeting beauty, a momentary escape from the burdens he carried. None among them could have imagined the storm encircling him. The woman seated behind, no carefree traveler but a shadow operative whose phone served as a lifeline to command centers, coordinating with precision born from years of clandestine training. The photographer across the way, his camera not a tool for art but an instrument of surveillance, capturing every subtle gesture, every breath, for reports that would justify the unthinkable. And concealed beneath the seat just ahead, a device of nightmarish ingenuity, no larger than a travel spray bottle, engineered in secret labs to dispense a toxin so advanced it infiltrated the body like a silent assassin, mimicking the symptoms of a catastrophic heart attack hours after exposure, allowing the victim to continue unaware until the poison's grip tightened in isolation. His final moments a whirlwind of confusion, pain, and unspoken regrets for the life he leaves behind. The apparatus of this profound tragedy had been activated days prior, in dimly lit safe houses scattered across Europe where agents huddled over blueprints and timelines, their faces illuminated by the cold glow of screens, hearts heavy with the knowledge of what they were about to unleash. By the time the train's whistle pierced the crisp air and it eased away from Milan's Grand Central station, with its arched ceilings echoing the ghosts of countless departures, Mahmoud's fate was sealed. An inexorable equation where factors of opportunity, chemistry, and escape converged into a lethal certainty that evokes tears for the fragility of human existence. This story transcends the mere recounting of one man's fall. It is a heartrending lament for the toll of perpetual conflict, where intelligence machineries elevate the act of killing to a refined, almost poetic craft bureaucracy becomes the cold skeleton supporting erasure, and a vibrant soul is extinguished amid the apathy of strangers, leaving investigators to chase phantoms while families grapple with the void, their grief a bottomless well of sorrow and unanswered whys. It unveils the hidden skirmishes raging beneath the veneer of Europe's enchanting cities. Bustling cafes where deadly plots are hatched over espresso, luxurious hotels sheltering operatives haunted by their deeds, train stations transformed into theaters of finality, waged by agents whose most potent weapon isn't brute force but the devastating cunning to disguise atrocity as coincidence, turning personal tragedies into footnotes in the annals of unfortunate events. And delving deeper, one confronts the soul-crushing darkness. A worldwide framework where select individuals are deemed unworthy of life, deleted with the impersonal efficiency of a bureaucratic stamp, upholding only the illusion of order while the human spirit fractures in the silence, dreams unfulfilled, loves lost forever. To fully comprehend the depth of Mahmoud's tragedy, one must embark on a journey back to the man himself, the aspirations that fueled his fire, the scars that molded his unyielding resolve, and the inexorable hunt that culminated in his poignant demise. Born in 1967 beneath the unrelenting gaze of the Gaza sun, Mahmoud entered a world where the Mediterranean's soothing waves lapped against shores marred by the stains of ongoing strife, the atmosphere saturated with the poignant blend of sea salt's freshness and gunpowder's bitterness, a sensory imprint that seeped into every facet of his formative years, shaping a boy into a symbol of resilient defiance. His father, a devoted schoolteacher with ink-flecked fingers and a voice as gentle as an evening breeze, imparted lessons not confined to textbooks but drawn from the harsh realities of occupation, emphasizing education as a shield against despair, a tool to carve paths through walls of oppression. His mother, a steadfast nurse laboring in a United Nations clinic, her hands weathered from binding wounds, physical and emotional, returned home each evening with tales of endurance that concealed her own fatigue, her unwavering love a lighthouse guiding her children through storms of uncertainty. From his earliest recollections, Mahmoud's existence was punctuated by the ominous rumble of tanks patrolling dusty avenues, their treads grinding hope into the earth, soldiers issuing commands in a language heavy with authority, evoking a sense of chains binding the spirit. Each detonation wasn't a remote rumble but a visceral assault, shaking the foundations of his humble abode and inscribing fear into his tender heart, planting seeds of resistance that would germinate amid tears and determination. Gaza during the 1970s and 1980s served as a heartbreaking crucible of human suffering, checkpoints that strangled the flow of life, transforming routine outings into gauntlets of humiliation where dignity was stripped away in public view. Curfews that imprisoned families within their homes, where candlelight flickered over whispered stories of better days, masking the sobs of children frightened by shadows. Arbitrary detentions that tore loved ones apart, leaving children to wonder if fathers would return, their absence a gaping wound in the fabric of family. Mahmoud absorbed survival's bitter curriculum early on. Observe with the keenness of a hawk, speak only when words carry weight to avoid the snares of betrayal, morph into a shadow when peril loomed. For in this land, visibility often invited calamity, where a misplaced word or glance could summon disappearance or worse, leaving families to mourn in anguished silence. Invisibility became not merely a tactic but a lifeline, a cloak fashioned from necessity in an environment where drawing attention equated to courting disaster, where funerals for the fallen became communal cries of grief and resolve. Academic records from those chaotic times portray him as a child of uncanny serenity, his poise a tranquil haven amid the tempests that buffeted his contemporaries. While peers unleashed their fury in outbursts of stones and shouts, Mahmoud dissected the turmoil with analytical detachment, his intellect a refuge where emotions were harnessed like turbulent rivers channeled for power. He thrived in mathematics, unraveling intricate puzzles with the concentration of a tactician plotting liberation from an inescapable maze. In linguistics, he clandestinely immersed himself in Hebrew, eavesdropping on adversary broadcasts under night's veil, transcribing phrases that demystified the oppressor's vernacular, converting their confidences into instruments of counteraction. By his teenage years, he had evolved into a messenger for subterranean resistance factions, his pulse racing like a war drum as he concealed encrypted notes within his footwear's lining, navigating past armed sentinels with simulated nonchalance, a youth shouldering the aspirations of an entire populace, each stride a precarious ballet with mortality. The first Intifada's eruption in his 20th year transmuted Gaza into a seething cauldron of visceral passion and valiant desperation. Thoroughfares alive with the cacophony of rocks clashing against armored hulls, a ballad of uprising where adolescents flung defiance at an implacable colossus, frequently at the expense of crimson spills and shattered ambitions. From concealed rooftops, Mahmoud observed with a fusion of reverence and deep-seated grief. His vision blurred by tear gas and unshed tears, as companions succumbed or were hauled away, their pleas resonating in his nocturnal terrors. Nevertheless, amidst the devastation, an epiphany pierced his essence. Unbridled might was ephemeral, a transient gale. Authentic triumph resided in stratagem, in the meticulous orchestration of maneuvers that endured beyond momentary wrath. This insight, forged from the remnants of fallen comrades, redefined his trajectory, elevating a mourning adolescent into a formidable intellect whose acuity would torment foes for epochs, his subdued tenacity a beacon against tyranny. What set Mahmoud apart was not a conflagration of animosity, but a frigid rationality that inspired both veneration and trepidation. A perspective of strife as a discipline, where chronology and influence eclipsed emotion's volatile blaze. Companions recollected him as impeccably restrained. His tone a tender murmur even amid crises, his ire interred beneath strata of steel resolve. He bore a pocket ledger like a relic, its folios crammed with ciphered illustrations, numerals, and annotations. Every exchange documented, every frailty assessed with a healer's accuracy. He adhered to patterns of parity in numerals for convocations and lodgings, as if equilibrium could impose harmony on a disordered cosmos, averting the caprice that devoured so many existences. Grins were scarce armaments deployed like calibrated gambits on a game board to placate confederates.
Mislead adversary, élicite déférence sans elvating à clanche-tende.
He eschewed inebriation's fog and the hazards of throngs, embracing seclusion as a bastion where disloyalty couldn't infiltrate. A confidant once imparted a maxim that encapsulated his core, utterances infused with the melancholy of a shadowed existence. He who articulates liberally drafts a blueprint for his pursuers. He who hearkens becomes the obscurity itself, imperceptible and perpetual. This creed of furtiveness became his bulwark, empowering him to traverse antagonistic terrains for annals, a specter eluding the clutches of those intent on muting him eternally. Within Hamas's echelons, Mahmoud's ascension exemplified the potency of understated brilliance, not via charismatic harangues that incited multitudes to frenzy, but through the irrefutable validation of outcomes that preserved lives and perpetuated the crusade. He triumphed where others perished in flames of haste, his lattices segmented like concealed alcoves in a citadel, guaranteeing that a rupture in one wouldn't condemn the entirety. By the twilight of the 1990s, he had become indispensable, the unseen designer whose fiscal conduits, arteries of aspiration throbbing through embargoes, infused resources that maintained resistance's ember amid sieges that famished physiques and psyches alike. Israeli reconnaissance first entangled with him amid the Intifada's rage, apprehending him with incriminating proof of encoded dispatches and sanctuary inventories. 7 moons of confinement ensued, a grueling trial of inquisitions in dimly illuminated cells, where queries pounded like incessant surges, aiming to fracture his fortitude. Yet Mahmoud remained unyielding, his gaze diverted, his retorts scant and monotonous. You perceive solely what you crave, liberated into a realm altered yet oppressively identical. He surfaced not as a fractured individual, but as a myth tempered in hardship, his reticence an emblem of distinction that evoked whispers of reverence among allies and exasperation among foes. As the 1990s yielded to a novel millennium of intensifying frictions, Mahmoud adapted his methodologies with sagacity born of bereavement, acknowledging that overt aggression, explosions that cleaved the atmosphere with shrieks and rubble, garnered universal censure but yielded scant tactical leverage, often at the expense of blameless lives that tormented the communal conscience. What the movement yearned for was perpetuity, invisible frameworks of finance and provisioning that could withstand the unremitting assaults of quarantines and aerial barrages, safeguarding hope's spark through the gloomiest nocturnes. Mahmoud emerged as the visionary constructor of these frameworks, interlacing decentralized meshes where each nexus functioned autonomously, united by fidelity and ciphered doctrines that defied interception, enlisting a varied cadre, engineers envisioning brighter morrows, financiers maneuvering ethical ambiguities, contrabandists hazarding all for a purpose transcending self. Relocating to Damascus beneath the safeguarding canopy of the Syrian administration, which harbored banished chieftains as pawns in regional machinations, he directed Al-Maslak, the Trail, a covert lifeline meandering from Gaza's beleaguered bastions through Lebanon's terrains, Cyprus's isles, and the Sinai's perilous dunes, conveying armaments, intelligence, and capital with the stealth of a nocturnal zephyr. European guardianship entities commenced detecting subtle undulations. Consignments diverted through convoluted harbors, benevolent facades laundering currency via discreet repositories in Zurich's resplendent vaults and Vienna's historic chambers, all choreographed by Mahmoud's virtuoso grasp while he upheld the pretense of a compassionate relief orchestrator, his mild countenance disarming envoys as he concealed the desperation propelling his every gesture. To antagonists, he was designated a facilitator, a barren phrase that understated the profound menace he represented, a tacit sovereign whose sway undulated through the umbra, nurturing a contention that declined extinguishment. Mossad's quest for Mahmoud was a narrative of unceasing chase, a feline and rodent ballet across landmasses propelled by the visceral torment of existences forfeited in assaults his lattices facilitated. Kinships sundered by projectiles, progeny orphaned, societies eternally marred, a perpetual affliction demanding reprisal. His annihilation was deliberated in fortified chambers where the ambience hung ponderous with ethical gravity, sanctioned at Israel's apex as an imperative thrust for safeguarding, though each such verdict bore the encumbrance of humanity's shadowy urges. The maneuver unfolded with heartbreaking scrupulousness. Operatives permeated Milan weeks beforehand, charting his habits with the frigid scrutiny of hunters, every café sojourn, every registration inscribed in compilations that diminished a vitality to metrics. The elected venom, a laboratory-spawned abomination, was chosen for its insidious finesse, hueless, scentless at genesis, efflorescing into lethal emulation of cardiac cataclysm hours subsequently, permitting the casualty to persist oblivious until the toxin's clasp constricted in seclusion. His contemplations perchance drifting to cherished ones forsaken, the crusade incomplete, compunctions surging like unwept lacrimae. On the conveyance, the contrivance, obscured in plain vista, invigorated with a muted directive, discharging its cargo amid the buzz of dialogue and rattling rails. Mahmoud might have sensed the ephemeral disquiet, a vertigo dismissed as weariness from interminable evasion, until his physique betrayed him in that cramped enclosure, solitary with the engine's bellow and his world's waning illumination, a poignant termination to an existence of hushed rebellion. The unmasking of his demise unleashed a deluge of disarray, the conductor's visage bleaching as he beckoned authorities, passengers' pulses accelerating with dread. Was it contagion? Homicide? As conjectures swirled like vapor. Inquiries traversed sovereignties, Italian forensics colliding with Israel's barricaded refutations, ciphered data unveiling Mossad's ethereal grip. Hamas proclaimed him a martyr, Gaza's avenues overflowing with lamenters, banners fluttering in gusts of woe, incantations of reprisal ascending like supplications from fractured cores. In Israel, formal muteness veiled subdued alleviation, yet accentuated by the mournful verity of ceaseless war's levy. Diplomatically, indignation erupted, Italy decrying sovereignty's infringement, Europe fortifying defenses against phantoms, America scrutinizing with detached arithmetic. Media depicted the saga as a suspense, but beneath sensationalism lay profound tragedy. Kin in perpetual lament, cycles perpetuated, humanity's radiance dimmed. This wasn't conquest. It was a dirge for forfeited potential, where acumen clashed with might, yielding only abysses. Years hence, the Milan-Rome locomotive persists, voyagers in carriage for oblivious to the specter that lingers, imbibing lattes where a soul exhaled its final. No cenotaph designates the locale, no almond aroma haunts the ether. Perfection's ruthless bequest, obliterating sorrow to sustain delusion. Mahmoud's chronicle reverberates in subdued narratives. A strategist toppled, inspiring successors amid upheaval. His demise exposes our realm's vulnerability, nations brandishing death as artistry, frontiers permeable to authorities' extension. Share your meditations. If this account stirred your essence, engage, subscribe. Conceal additional heartaches, awaiting disclosure.